Battlefield 6 promised to be a return to form for the series. Revisiting modern combat for the first time since 2013's Battlefield 4, this latest installment feels like a back-to-basics reset. The hero shooter approach of 2042 has been dropped in favour of a return to classic class-based combat, lobbies have returned to a max of 64 players, and the art style and weapons have intentionally harkened back to the glory days of Battlefield 3's gritty sandbox. This is the continuation that many have dreamed about for over a decade now, but does the final product live up to that long wait? Well, before we jump in, I should probably clarify exactly what this review is. EA was kind enough to send through a code early so that I could play the game, but I haven't been able to spend as much time with the multiplayer as I would have liked before recording this. The nature of only having a handful of people playing pre-launch, shout out to Tomographic by the way, who annihilated me in like 90% of my matches, means that I also haven't been able to properly put the maps and modes through their paces. So consider the multiplayer portion of this review and extensive first impressions based on my time with the finished code and the experience that I got hands-on with pre-launch. The single player, however, will get a complete review later on in this video as I have played that front to back, while unfortunately Portal wasn't accessible during this review period, at least for me. So let's start with a major up, and that's just how good multiplayer feels to play. It's even better than the beta. Shooting and movement is responsive and satisfying, blending the more grounded, weightier approach that Battlefield often takes while retaining a strong sense of fluidity of movement and animation. Weapon handling is another highlight of the overhauled game feel. Recoil can be substantial at first, but unlocking attachments goes a long way in taming the kickback on the more powerful assault rifles and LMGs. A couple guns do feel like laser beams even without attachments, the MP5 comes to mind, but fortunately those super accurate weapons don't feel OP currently thanks to a slower rate of fire and a considerable firepower drop-off at range. Generally, the guns just feel great to use, feedback is satisfying and movement is as smooth as it's ever been. Great stuff. Going deeper into the weapon selection, there is also an impressive variety on display across the board. 8 assault rifles, 7 carbines, 8 SMGs, 8 LMGs, 4 DMRs, 3 sniper rifles, and 3 shotguns, and a partridge in a pear tree make up the available primary weapons. Attachments also feel more substantial than in the previous installment and more plentiful. As mentioned, they can radically alter a weapon's handling, but generally, there's a lot more variety across the board to cater to specific playstyles, with more attachment slots to boot. It's an extensive collection, and for freaks like me that enjoy getting to fully customize their arsenal, it's a real treat. It is a shame that the ability to switch attachments on the fly in-game hasn't carried over from 2042, but that's a minor gripe, so this gets an up. Battlefield 6's presentation is generally stellar across the board. The little details that were so sorely lacking in 2042 are thankfully back here. Being shot will spray blood onto your weapon, you'll be covered in dust and debris that flies up from the ground and from destroyed buildings, and the always incredible audio design does its best to heighten the anarchy around you. Though not a radical step up in terms of visual presentation, Battlefield 6 is still a looker, boasting stunning vistas on the horizons of maps, intricate destruction, and great lighting, all the while maintaining a consistent frame rate across both of its graphical modes. At least for now, it's committing to the Milsim style presentation with the unlocks as well, with camos and soldier appearances retaining a sense of realism. It might lack the vibrancy of some previous Battlefields, but it makes for a consistent high-quality presentation across the board, so let's give that another up. Destruction tech is once again a core staple of the experience, and the developers have used the latest hardware to deliver visually spectacular demolitions. Even better, on certain maps, larger scale Levolutions return from BF4, with players being able to bring down a huge crane to destroy a large part of the map's central building, for instance in one of the levels. It's a shame that the destruction isn't more granular though. There were a few structures that I didn't even know were destructible because when I hit them with a rocket, all that was left was a black scorch mark. Sometimes there aren't those in-between states that make destruction feel more dynamic. A wall can be either completely fine or completely destroyed. Still, it's hard to argue with the overall scale and execution and the amount of destruction per map, which absolutely deserves an up. The class system has been somewhat divisive since its return. The option to not lock weapons to classes outside a specific playlist was viewed as a half step to some. But for my money, the developers have done well to refocus the gameplay around class-based loadouts. Though they all share core weapons, each still have their own definable attributes outside of the standard gadget selection. Specific grenades, for instance, are locked behind specific classes, with the likes of the support class given an exclusive incendiary grenade, while Assault gets access to stuns and flashes. Classes have multiple different training paths available as well, essentially class-specific perks that activate throughout a match. These aren't game changers, but they are welcome additions, giving you a slight buff to attributes if you play to a class's strength, such as Assault's slight increase to the time it takes to capture objectives. The same can be said about weapon proficiencies, which gives each class passive boosts if they use a specific type of weapon, but it's not a deal breaker if you don't. Generally, I also like the fundamental changes to each class as well. The support and medic here have been merged, meaning that one class now has the ability to revive players and dish out ammo supplies. In my experience, this has meant a higher likelihood of actually being revived in a round. Assault is the brand new class with a focus on offense. Though not my personal class of choice, it does make a good case for itself, featuring a third weapon slot for a shotgun and access to an assault ladder which can open up new flanks for teammates on a map. I don't think the class system will tick the box for every die-hard Battlefield fan out there, but it is deeper than it has been in a long time, with new additions that provide welcome changes to the formula, so let's give that an up. Alright, let's talk about the most controversial part of Battlefield 6 in the run-up to launch, the maps. Pre-release, following access to smaller infantry-focused maps in the beta, there was the worry that the large sandbox focus of the previous titles might have been lost. And while there are some great larger maps in the game, I can't say for certain that those worries are unfounded. But first, let's start with the positives. Generally, the maps are well designed, so that gets an up. Early highlights for me include Manhattan Bridge, which features great urban warfare, especially in the breakthrough mode, with a nice amount of elevation to keep things interesting. Mirak Valley is another, whose small village outposts and muddy fields encircle a sprawling central structure. They're fun to play, they're atmospheric, and for the most part feature a lot of potential for destruction. The fact that the opening 9 maps are going to feature new additions starting the end of the month with Season 1 as well is also a huge plus. Overall, for me, these well-designed maps definitely get an up. It's a great selection. This is where it gets tricky, however. Though there certainly are larger maps than in the beta, Mirak Valley is as big as you're gonna get, and it doesn't feel particularly massive by Battlefield standards. There is undeniably a larger focus on faster-paced combat and infantry engagements in the majority of the maps. 3 of them, Empire State, Manhattan Bridge, and Saints Quarter, are described as being focused on close quarters combat, while I'd also argue that Siege of Cairo and Iberian Offense are both small maps as well by Battlefield standards. With Operation Firestorm being a remake of a previous map, that leaves only 3 medium to large-sized new maps for the launch rotation. That said, I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing in theory, just different. Bigger maps were the focus of 2042, while BF6 is attempting to differentiate itself by focusing more on close quarters. Like I said, the maps are high quality and play well. It'll just be whether or not this new approach is up to your own personal taste. For me, I would have liked to have seen 1 or 2 more truly large maps at launch, so I'm gonna give that a down, but generally it is a strong selection that plays well on different game modes, so I give that an up. 1 or 2 bigger maps just would have sorted this out for me. In terms of game modes, there's a good selection at launch as well. The marquee all-out warfare ones are of course Conquest and Breakthrough, this year joined by Escalation, another objective-based mode defined around capturing specific territories. It kind of splits the difference between the 2 classic modes and is a meaningful addition to the multiplayer suite, so that gets an up. Breakthrough, the mode where one team attacks 1 or 2 objectives and then pushes further into the map if they're successful, is still very enjoyable here, but it maybe lacks a bit of the spectacle that it had in other games. With smaller maps and an infantry focus, matches can be steamrolled in minutes if you get an imbalanced team. So far, it's lacking in that great attritional structure that makes the mode so special to me. Whether it's the map sizes or objective locations, the experience feels a little too breezy currently. It's still a good mode, don't get me wrong, but it feels a little stripped back compared to the glory days of BF1's operations, so for now that gets it down. Technically speaking, and I thank the heavens for this, I haven't encountered any issues while playing the multiplayer so far. Keep in mind, of course, that I was playing in a different environment than at launch, but everything was spot on during my time. There was one glitch I noticed where sometimes uneven terrain would launch me in the air like I'd just done a double jump, but playing on the PS5 Pro, performance was solid, frame rates remained steady during hectic periods, and I didn't experience any lag or rubber banding in matches. Hit detection also seemed sound as well, though some visual inconsistencies with the terrain I was behind sometimes led to me shooting at a wall, blocking my barrel even though my crosshairs were firmly pointed at an enemy. Thankfully, this was rare though. I also didn't report any of the level hacking that we saw in the beta with players getting out of bounds, and hopefully there aren't similar exploits found in other maps when everyone gets their hands on them. It was a far cry from the state that 2042 was in at launch, put it that way, and unless something massively breaks, the technical performance has to get an up. Overall, then, this is the most compelling multiplayer suite Battlefield has seen in quite some time. Though there is always room for improvement, it's a brilliant, content-rich starting point and a statement of intent for the returning series. And that brings us to the single-player campaign, which, while not being why 90% of fans come to this franchise, has been touted as a major selling point in the run-up to release. And sadly, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, and that's being generous. It starts off strong, with a bombastic opening sequence that has you embodying our de facto main character, the grizzle-voiced Murphy, who is the only survivor of a surprise attack on his military base. The opening establishes the stakes well. It works as a surprisingly emotional intro, with confident, albeit cliched, characterization, compelling gameplay, and a sick title drop that promises only more intensity from here on out. Unfortunately, that promise is never quite fulfilled, and a major down is how this story plays out. As we jump around a confusing timeline in the shoes of Murphy and his new squad mates, it's easy to get the sense that Battlefield 6's campaign has been rushed out the door. Clocking in at a little over 5 hours, it's not that the campaign is short. I mean, that's to be expected when multiplayer is the main focus, but rather that it just feels incomplete. The villain is absent for much of the runtime, key developments are skipped over or explained off-screen, characters enter the story without proper grounding and context, and the epilogue quickly rushes out a sequel hook that doesn't feel like a natural continuation of the game that you just played. And it's a shame, because there are some genuinely interesting ideas in there. Murphy's PTSD after the opening mission is mentioned maybe one more time in the rest of the story, but it could have played a much bigger part in his development and reluctance to step up to lead another team. The core conflict between PAX, a private military organization vying for global control, and the rest of the world as well, is ultimately underdeveloped, despite having the potential to be an interesting alt-reality version of the present day. Though twists and turns do come eventually, for most of the playtime it's difficult to remember what's happening, who's involved, and why exactly you're doing what you're doing in any given mission. Unfortunately, technical issues with the campaign don't help matters either. Multiple times I tried to boot up the campaign from the menu with it just loading to a black screen and getting stuck there. To remedy this, I'd have to quit the application entirely and head back to the menu, or in one rare occasion was even forced to restart the mission entirely. Visual bugs popped up here and there as well, including animations that clipped through geometry, one moment where my character clipped through a vehicle and traveled underneath the map, and one more annoying moment where an objective just broke outright and the game wouldn't spawn the next wave of enemies, meaning I had to restart from the checkpoint and hope the scripting would work this time around. Thankfully it did. So yeah, it feels like it's coming in hot, and until a patch drops, this has to be another down. Fortunately, at least the campaign, when it works, is enjoyable to play, so that gets an up. Though the connective tissue and the characterization might not be there, the missions themselves are at least fun, nicely paced, and put the focus on Battlefield's core components. There's light squad commands to shake up gunfights and add a touch of tactical depth, with players being able to focus fire on specific targets, instruct the demolition expert to RPG vehicles, or to drop smoke bombs. Though most of the campaign is linear, there are a few moments as well with more freedom, with the final level in particular dropping you into a sandbox and allowing you to dictate which objectives to tackle first and what kind of approach you want to take. It's all good enough, but it's also nothing you haven't seen before. Hell, you can probably sketch out the entire structure of the campaign in your head right now. There's the sniper mission, there's the stealth mission with night vision goggles and room clearing, there's the tank level, there's the big American city shootout. It's playing the hits, but at least it's playing them well. And in a way, that could kind of sum up the entire Battlefield 6 experience. There isn't much in the way of reinventing the wheel here, but that refocusing was exactly what the franchise needed after straying so far away from its roots. When all is said and done, this is a stunning multiplayer shooter rich with content and as polished and smooth as the franchise has ever been. It's a shame you can't say the same about the single-player campaign though, which despite some great ideas and some fun sequences, doesn't quite pack the same punch. Thankfully, that doesn't detract too much from making this an amazing Battlefield game though, especially for the multiplayer fans out there. Ooh, that was a biggie, wasn't it? I've got so much to say about this game and I've only scratched the surface of certain elements, but I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Are you still looking forward to this installment? And what did you think about the beta and what do you hope they've changed? Let me know, and while you're still here, if you want to click one of these videos on screen right now, you can watch more good content like this.